Hey everyone, I'm Joe and today I'm going to be doing a book review of Ravencry by McDonald. This is a fantasy novel which many people class as dark fantasy. I personally have an interesting point to make about the dark fantasy classification later in the review. This is the second book in the Raven's Mark series. The first novel, which I have here, is called Blackwing. I greatly enjoyed this novel last year when I read it and did a separate review of it, which I'll link in the description box below. I thought very highly of this book indeed. And the second book, Ed McDonald has actually managed to surpass the first book, and actually this is much better than the first book, which is an achievement because the first I really did like a lot. So this is going to be a fairly positive review, although of course there are little flaws with it here or there, as there are with most books, frankly. So first of all, the series title, The Raven's Mark, refers to the main character, who is called Royhold Gatherhoe. He is a Blackwing, which refers to the obvious title of the first book, and a Blackwing is a mercenary of sorts, and they are specifically mercenaries who answer to one man, and that is Crowfoot. Crowfoot is a very interesting individual. He's not exactly a normal man. I'm not going to say too much about him, but he's an extremely powerful figure within this world. There are fewer people like him in the world as well. And Royhold has a tattoo of a raven, which is the cover of the book as well, on his arm. And when Crowfoot wants to contact Royhold about something extremely important, the raven tattoo sort of rips out of his arm with a large amount of pain and agony for Royhold, turns into a real crow, temporarily, a real raven I should say, not a crow, and it will then talk to Royhold and tell him something very important that needs to be done, and Royhold doesn't have to do it strictly speaking, but it would be problematic if it didn't, because he owes Crowfoot a lot, a phenomenal amount, for certain events that happened in the past. So for now he's in debt to Crowfoot, and this tattoo, or the mark, is his way of getting the message from Crowfoot to him, and therefore doing his work. And he's considered a sort of good person overall. Both Crowfoot is as such, and indeed Royhold. Well, obviously some people would disagree with that, of course. Now, the book is set 4 years after the events of Blackwing. Things have calmed down, relatively speaking. Obviously there is still a lot of chaos because the first book left things in flux, let's say, quite badly. But overall, yes, they are calmer than they were, although a lot of things have changed. And one of the things that have changed is the fact that there are now throughout the city visions of this person or creature or something called the Bright Lady. Random people are getting visions of this Bright Lady randomly throughout the city, and as a result it is creating essentially a kind of a religious cult or a religion around it. And certain people are, unfortunately, although unpredictably frankly, are creating a kind of power base using the Bright Lady as this visionary person who will bring great things in the future if only you believe in her fully. And obviously their way of believing in her and worshipping her, and obviously therefore donating money and such, is the only way. And this is becoming a problem because it's becoming a significant and powerful force. It's disrupting the normal political power in the city, which is already in trouble because of events of the first book. So this is making things highly unstable, and the city is barely hanging on. So it's calmer, but only just. Obviously it doesn't remain calm for long, unsurprisingly. And Royhold has to deal with the situation, and he has to deal with another event, because at the very start of the book, somebody or something breaks into a vault which is owned by Crowfoot. This vault is supposed to be impenetrable, completely impossible to break into, but somehow somebody or something manages it. Royhold gets a message through his tattoo, and his message is quite simply find out what happened with the vault and who has stolen what and get it back, period. what it is extremely important. Well, knows it is, because obviously Crowfoot doesn't contact him about insignificant things, so he has to rush through, find out what this is, and as well as try not to get murdered by the followers of the White Lady in their weird yellow clothing and yellow masks and stuff. And to do this, he has to go on a sort of adventure, unsurprisingly, throughout the city, trying to uncover certain facts about who's behind the White Lady and who's behind the theft of this item from Quirrell's vault. He also has to go back into the misery again, like in the first book, but this time it's dealt with in an even larger way and even more in depth. The misery is an area around the city. This city has this extremely powerful weapon as defensive. However, this weapon is extremely destructive, and when it is used, it is kind of like, I always think of it as a kind of like a nuclear railgun of sorts, like sort of like a nuclear missile launcher, and it devastates and warps the land where it hits. It kills the enemy that is trying to attack the city over time, but it turns it into the misery, which is a warped and twisted and very dark place, which has a very unhealthy effect on anybody who has to go through the misery, which White Hulk does again. And this time it's in a worse way, because he has to go there for longer, and this time it's not so focused. He doesn't quite know where he needs to go in the misery this time. In the first book it was well known what you have to do. In this, he's not exactly sure of himself as much, because events are sort of starting to spiral out of control, and he's not in control of them, obviously. So he's obviously trying to become in control of them to a certain point. And the plot goes from there. So I don't want to spoil anything else, because that's about the minimum I can say without spoilers. But it is a very interesting plot point overall, and I really did enjoy it. Now, as you might expect from this description, Wild has made some significant changes from what he was in the first book. He has evolved into something new in this book, and indeed he is still evolving, because of course the events of this book are forcing him to change and think differently yet again. And I do not know how many books are going to be in this series, but he's going to be quite different in some respects than what he was in the first book, because he's undergone some very dark things before even the first book happened. First book, some dark things happened to him. This book, again, just as dark in certain ways, and he's had to change and adapt to what's happened to him, otherwise he would die. And he's not going to die, at least not yet, because he's the main character. He could well die in the last book, of course, because that's what sometimes happens. And he's a very interesting character, is what I hope, because he's, in some ways, he's not a very nice character to some people, but generally he's thought of as a good guy. He just happens to be working for somebody who is kind of a little bit of an unknown enigma, because people are not sure what or who Crowfoot is exactly, and people are a bit wary of him as a result, because of the power that the Black Wings have, and which obviously Royal is the leader of. It's quite significant, and it's a very weird dynamic between him and, frankly, most people, but it's an interesting one overall. Now, his team, which are the Black Wings, are very, very small and a very sort of eclectic mix. Now, they don't focus on them too heavily, but they are a very interesting dynamic with Rifle, because for reasons I don't want to go into too heavily, because it will contain spoilers, they are very different from him, but all of them have at least one characteristic in common with him, or different characteristics, and this creates a very curious dynamic, and he gets on with them for different reasons, and likes them and dislikes them for different reasons as well. So, and they do help him, of course, throughout the book in different ways, and people are trying to use them against each other as well. There's ones behind the scenes in charge of the Bright Lady phenomenon, and indeed the one behind the theft is trying to manipulate Garrow, because they know Rifle Garrow is a powerful figure, and they know he's not going to stop easily, so they're trying to take him out basically as much and as brutally as they can, because otherwise their plans are in trouble and are going to fail as well. Overall, there is no big obvious overarching storyline between the books. Yes, there is a sort of continuing overall idea from book 1 to book 2, and indeed there is something that is brought forward, obviously, into the next book whenever that is released. But it's not like, this isn't just like the middle book in a trilogy. Whether it's going to be a trilogy, I don't know. You know, where sometimes they have that middle book feel where it's just kind of like a sort of continuation of it. This is its own story. The first book was its own story, and the third book, and if there are any more, each book will be its own story. You get that distinct feeling. They hold up completely separately, and you could almost read this by itself without reading the first book. I wouldn't recommend it because it obviously is a good sequel, and it would be a bit strange if you did, but you almost could, because it does stand up that well on its own. And I like that fact, because sometimes with big fantasy series, sometimes when they're ongoing, you don't know when they're going to end, and also the books, because of it, feel like they're just a cog rather than their own thing. With this, that doesn't happen. This is its own story, and one that I greatly liked. One last important point that I want to make before I finish this review is about the dark aspect of the novel. Some people class it as dark fantasy, and whilst that is, I suppose, true, I wouldn't class it as being that dark. It's certainly not grim dark. Grim dark I have issues with, because I find it, quite frankly, too grim and dark, unsurprisingly. I am an optimist by nature, and grimdark I always find very negative and very pessimistic. And this book isn't dark in that particular sense. It is not pessimistic and negative. Yes, it has moments, of course, but ultimately there's still a feeling that things will get better. Yes, the main character suffers horribly in the book, so do other characters, same as in the first book, but things will improve eventually. You know, there'll be horrible things happening to get to that improvement, but improvements will happen nevertheless. So, you know, there's still light there. As a result, I don't like just calling this dark fantasy, because there's too much light for my way of thinking for this. You know, there is promise there of a brighter future, and I like that, frankly. And this is the kind of fantasy that I like, where it's not all doom and gloom. There is light in the darkness eventually. So overall, this is an extremely good fantasy book. It is actually improved upon the first book, Blackwing, which is frankly an achievement by itself, because the first book I really did thoroughly enjoy last year, and I did that separate review about them, and that's how good I thought it was. This improves in virtually every way. The characters are more in depth, more detailed. The dynamics between the characters is even better. You get to go back to the misery again, which is a really curious area from the first book, and in this it's actually explored and gone into more detail, which is frankly great. And the misery is unlike many areas in virtually any other book I could think of, which I really like as well, because it's an interesting area, albeit not a very cheerful one, but an interesting nevertheless. Overall, I would highly recommend this to all fantasy fans who like something that is both, yes, dark, but is not horribly miserable, frankly, and it's got light about it and has a overall a sort of optimistic feel, at least from my point of view. And with that said, that is pretty much it for this review. If you've read the first book, or indeed read the second book, then please leave me a comment. Or you would like to do so, then, you know, leave a comment and we can have a conversation. My link to my review of the first book, Blackwing, can be found in the description box below, as well as all my social media links. And with that said, that is it for this review. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you another day. Bye for now.